Maya stood frozen on the sidewalk, her heart racing as the two officers loomed over her. She had done everything they asked. She had shown her ID, explained where she was going, and even tried to remain calm despite the fear building inside her. Yet instead of letting her walk home, they insisted she come with them for further questioning. The words echoed in her mind, sharp and unfair. She knew she was innocent, but the way they looked at her made her feel powerless. "I really haven't done anything wrong," she whispered again, almost pleading. Her voice trembled, but she tried to stay respectful, hoping they would change their minds. One officer stepped closer, his voice cold. "You're arguing, that's resisting." The word struck her like a heavy stone. Resisting? She hadn't even moved. All she wanted was to go home. Maya shook her head quickly, trying to clear the fear. "I'm not arguing, I'm scared. Please understand." But her words seemed invisible to them. The second officer grabbed her arm, not roughly at first, but with enough force to make her flinch. She gasped, startled, and instinctively tried to pull back. That tiny movement was all they needed to decide she was resisting. "Stop pulling away," the officer barked. I'm not, please, you're hurting me," Maya cried out, her voice carrying down the quiet street. A few people across the road turned their heads, their faces filled with concern, but no one stepped forward. Some lifted their phones, recording, while others looked away, unsure how to react. Maya could hear the faint clicking of cameras and the soft murmur of onlookers whispering to each other. The world around her blurred as the fear inside her grew stronger. The officer twisted her arm behind her back, pushing her toward the police car. Maya winced, her knees nearly buckling from the pressure. "Please, stop," she begged. "I didn't do anything." Her voice cracked with desperation, but it made no difference. The other officer pressed her shoulder down firmly, forcing her against the car's cold metal hood. She could feel the rough surface against her cheek, her book slipping from her bag and scattering onto the pavement. Pages fluttered across the sidewalk like leaves in the wind. The sight of her notes and textbooks, symbols of her hard work and determination, lying carelessly on the ground only deepened her heartbreak. "Stop resisting," the officer shouted again, though Maya's body had gone limp from shock. She wasn't resisting. She was too scared even to move. But every cry, every small movement she made in pain was twisted into something it wasn't. The sound of people recording grew clearer now. A woman across the street called out, "She's not resisting, leave her alone." But the officers ignored the voice, their focus fixed only on their version of events. Maya's eyes stung with tears, not just from the pain in her arm, but from the crushing realization that she was completely powerless. She thought of her father, of how proud he always was when she stayed strong in difficult moments. She wished more than anything he could appear beside her now. But all she had was the cold grip of the officers and the stares of strangers. Her heart pounded as they cuffed her wrists tightly, the metal biting into her skin. She had never felt so small, so helpless. Her voice shook as she tried once more to reason with them. "Please, you don't understand. I'm a student. I was just going home. Please believe me." The officers didn't answer. One pushed her into the back of the police car while the other picked up her scattered books, tossing them carelessly into her backpack before throwing it onto the seat beside her. The car door slammed shut with a heavy sound, trapping her inside. Through the tinted window, Maya could see the small crowd that had gathered. Some were filming, others whispering, and a few shaking their heads in disbelief. She locked eyes with a young man who looked about her age. His expression was full of sympathy, and though he didn't speak, his silent gaze told her that at least someone saw the truth, that she was innocent. That look gave her a small thread of strength to hold onto in the storm of fear that surrounded her. Inside the car, the air was heavy and suffocating. Maya tried to steady her breathing, but her chest felt tight. Her mind raced with questions she couldn't answer. Why was this happening? What had she done to deserve this? She thought of her studies, of her dreams, of the life she had been building, and now, in a matter of minutes, it felt like everything was crumbling apart. She closed her eyes tightly, whispering to herself, "Stay calm, Maya. Just stay calm." But calmness was hard to find when the world felt so unfair. The officers got back into the car, their voices low as they spoke to each other. She couldn't hear everything, but words like resisting and report floated into her ears. They were already shaping a story, one that painted her as the problem. Maya's stomach churned. She realized with a sinking heart that no matter how polite she had been, no matter how innocent she was, they had already decided who she was in their eyes. As the car pulled away from the curb, Maya leaned her head against the cool glass of the window. Her mind drifted back to her father once more. Every night he told her to stay strong, to never let the world break her spirit. "You are braver than you know, Maya," he always said. Right now she needed that bravery more than ever. She thought of calling him, but she knew she wouldn't get the chance until they reached the station. Still, just imagining his voice gave her a flicker of hope. He had always protected her, and she trusted that somehow, some way he would protect her now too. The car drove through the quiet streets, the city lights passing in a blur. Maya pressed her eyes shut and tried to block out the fear. She knew this was only the beginning of a long night, but she also knew she couldn't let despair win. She didn't understand why this was happening, but she silently promised herself one thing. She would not let this moment define her. She was more than the way they saw her. The police car stopped in front of the station and the door opened with a loud click. One of the officers pulled Maya out, holding her firmly by the arm. Her wrists were still trapped in the cold handcuffs, and her shoulders ached from the pressure. She walked slowly, her legs shaky, as they led her inside the bright, echoing building. The walls were plain, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant, and everything about the place felt cold and unwelcoming. They placed her on a hard bench in the corner of the room. The officers began filling out paperwork, occasionally glancing at her as though she were nothing more than a case number. Maya kept her head down, trying to calm her pounding heart. She had never been in a police station before. Everything felt strange. The sound of typing, the heavy doors opening and closing, the constant buzz of voices. Minutes passed slowly, each second stretching longer than the last. Finally, one officer walked over and told her she could make a phone call. Relief washed over her like a wave. This was her chance. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment she could reach out to her father. They guided her to a small desk phone, uncuffing one of her hands so she could dial. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the receiver. For a brief second, she hesitated. She didn't want to worry her father, but she had no other choice. Taking a deep breath, she slowly dialed his number. Each button beeped loudly in the quiet room, and with every sound her heart beat faster. The line rang once, twice, then 3 times. She almost thought he wouldn't answer, but then his familiar, steady voice filled her ear. "Hello? Dad?" Maya whispered, her voice breaking. There was a pause on the other end. "Maya, what's wrong? You sound upset." His tone was calm but filled with concern. The tears she had been holding back began to fall. "Dad, I'm at the police station. They stopped me on my way home. They said I was resisting, but I didn't do anything. They hurt me and I'm so scared." For a moment, silence hung on the line. Then his voice came back, lower, more controlled, but carrying a power that made Maya's chest tighten. "Which station?" she quickly told him, her words tumbling out through her tears. On the other end, her father's tone changed completely. It was no longer just a father speaking to his daughter. It was a man of authority, a man who carried weight wherever he went. "Listen to me carefully, Maya," he said firmly but gently. "You are going to be okay. I'm coming right now. Do not be afraid." The strength in his voice steadied her trembling heart. She nodded even though he couldn't see her. "Okay, Dad." When she hung up, the officers nearby were smirking. One of them leaned closer. "Who'd you call? A lawyer? A friend?" Maya wiped her tears, her voice soft but steady. "My father." The officer chuckled. "And what's your father going to do? Pick you up and drive you home?" She didn't answer. Deep down, she knew they were about to find out exactly who her father was. Time dragged on, though it couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. Maya sat silently on the bench, her cuffs digging into her wrists. But her fear was slowly giving way to something else. Hope. She knew her father, and she knew that when he said he was coming, he meant it. The sound of heavy footsteps filled the room as the station door opened. Several men in dark suits entered, their presence commanding attention. The room grew quiet. Instantly, behind them came a tall, serious man with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Maya's heart leapt. It was her father. He walked straight to her, his expression calm but his eyes burning with quiet fury when he saw the cuffs on her wrists. "Maya," he said softly, kneeling down beside her. "Are you all right?" Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief. "I'm okay now, Dad." Her father stood, turning his gaze toward the officers. The room, once filled with chatter, had gone silent. Every officer present now recognized him, the director of the FBI. His reputation was known everywhere, and his position gave him authority that few could question. The officer who had mocked Maya earlier paled. His smirk vanished instantly. "So, sir, we were just what?" Her father interrupted, his voice firm, cutting through the air like a blade. He didn't raise his tone, but the weight of his words was enough to make the room tense. "You handcuffed my daughter, dragged her here, and accused her of resisting when all she was doing was walking home." The officers exchanged nervous glances. The papers on the desk suddenly looked useless, their excuses crumbling in the presence of someone far more powerful than them. One of the suited men who had arrived with Maya's father stepped forward, pulling out a small device. "Sir, we already have footage of the incident from multiple witnesses. It's circulating online as we speak." Maya's father's jaw tightened. He turned back to his daughter and gently removed the cuffs from her wrists. His hands, though steady, were filled with anger at the sight of the red marks left behind. "You don't touch her again," he said quietly to the officers, though his voice carried the weight of a command that no one dared to disobey. Maya clung to his arm, feeling the strength and safety she had been longing for since the moment they stopped her. She whispered, "I was so scared, Dad. I thought they wouldn't believe me." Her father placed his hand on her shoulder. "You did everything right, Maya. You were brave. Now it's my turn to handle this." The officers stood stiffly, their confidence shattered. They had no idea who they were dealing with when they stopped Maya, but now the truth was clear. The director of the FBI was not just any father. He was a man with the power to expose them, to hold them accountable, and to ensure justice was done. For the first time that night, Maya felt the balance of power shift. She was no longer the powerless girl being treated unfairly. She was the daughter of a man whose authority and integrity could not be ignored. The storm that had seemed endless only hours ago now showed a glimmer of light. She leaned against her father, her heart finally slowing down. The fight wasn't over, she knew that. But she also knew she was not alone, and with him by her side, things would never be the same again. The station grew heavy with silence after Maya's father arrived. Every officer inside seemed to realize that the man standing before them was not just another worried parent but the director of the FBI, a figure whose authority carried more weight than anyone in that room. Maya, still leaning against her father, felt her heartbeat finally steady. For the first time that night, she believed the nightmare might come to an end. Her father stood tall, his gaze sharp as he turned toward the officers. He didn't shout, but his voice carried a controlled power that filled the entire room. "I want an explanation, right now." The officer who had pushed Maya earlier swallowed hard. His confidence had evaporated, but he tried to speak. "Sir, she was acting suspicious. We thought—" "You thought?" Maya's father cut him off. His tone was icy, each word measured. "You thought a college student walking home from class looked suspicious? You thought forcing her against a car, handcuffing her and dragging her here was the right thing to do?" The officer's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His partner shifted uncomfortably, staring at the floor. The weight of guilt seemed to press on both of them now that their actions were being questioned at the highest level. One of the suited men who had come with Maya's father stepped forward. "Director, we've already collected multiple videos from bystanders. The footage is clear. Your daughter did nothing wrong. The officers escalated without cause." Maya's father's expression hardened even more. "Then I expect these men to be held accountable, immediately." The station chief, who had been standing in the background until now, hurried forward. His face was pale, his forehead damp with nervous sweat. "Sir, please, this is a misunderstanding. My officers were just doing their job." "Doing their job?" Maya's father repeated, his voice rising slightly, though still controlled. "Their job is to protect citizens, not intimidate and harm them. Their job is to uphold the law, not twist it into excuses for abuse. If this is what you call doing their job, then your entire department needs to be questioned." The chief froze, unable to answer. The power in the room had shifted completely. The officers who once looked so confident now stood like children, caught in the middle of a mistake too big to cover. The presence of the director of the FBI left no room for lies or excuses. Maya sat quietly, watching the exchange. She could feel her father's anger, but she also felt his strength. He wasn't just fighting as a father, he was fighting as a leader, as someone who believed in justice. It filled her with pride, even as the memory of what she had endured still ached inside her. Her father turned back to her, his voice softening for a moment. "Maya, are you hurt?" She shook her head slowly. "Just my arms. They twisted them hard. But I'm okay." His eyes darkened at her words. He looked back at the officers. "She's 20 years old, she's a student. And you treated her like a criminal. Do you know how many young people never recover from this kind of experience? Do you know the fear you planted in her tonight? That will stay with her forever." The officers shifted uncomfortably. No one dared to speak. Meanwhile, the men in suits, federal agents who had arrived with Maya's father, began taking notes, interviewing witnesses, and gathering every piece of evidence. The videos recorded by bystanders were already being uploaded online, spreading across social media. The story was no longer contained within the walls of the station. The world outside was starting to watch. The station phones began ringing. The chief answered one call, then another, his face growing paler with each conversation. Reporters were already calling, demanding answers. The situation was slipping out of his control faster than he could manage. Maya's father spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "From this moment on, this case is out of your hands. The FBI will handle the investigation. Your officers will be suspended pending review." The chief opened his mouth to protest, but one look from Maya's father silenced him. The authority in that look was undeniable. It wasn't anger alone. It was the certainty of a man who had the power to back up every word he spoke. Maya watched as the officers who had hurt her earlier were asked to surrender their badges for the time being. Their faces burned with shame as they removed the symbols of their authority, placing them on the desk. Just hours ago, they had laughed at her, mocking her fear. Now their confidence had been stripped away. For Maya, it was surreal. The same men who had made her feel small and powerless were now standing helpless in front of her father. The shift was almost overwhelming. She had been on the ground, begging them to believe her, and now the truth was undeniable. Her father placed a hand gently on her shoulder again. "You're safe now, Maya. You don't have to be afraid anymore." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. They were tears of relief this time, mixed with gratitude. But even as the immediate danger passed, Maya couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. The fear, the humiliation, the feeling of being powerless. Those memories clung to her. She realized that even though she was safe now, so many others never got the chance to be. Not everyone had a father with such power. Not everyone had protection when the system failed them. Her father seemed to sense her thoughts. He looked down at her and said quietly, "What happened tonight will not be forgotten. I promise you, Maya, this will lead to something bigger. We will make sure no other young person has to go through this again." The determination in his voice steadied her heart once more. She knew he meant it. He was not just her father. He was a man who believed in change, in using his authority to make things right. As they left the station together, the cool night air greeted them. Maya breathed deeply, feeling freer than she had in hours. Her father walked beside her, his presence like a shield. The flashing lights of news cameras were already gathering outside, reporters shouting questions as they tried to capture the story. Maya's father didn't stop to answer them yet. He guided her gently to the car waiting nearby. As the door closed behind them, Maya leaned back in her seat, exhausted but safe. Her father glanced at her and gave her a small, reassuring nod. The night wasn't over. The fight for justice had only just begun. But for Maya, one thing was certain. She was no longer alone in the struggle. The truth was out, the world was watching, and change was on the horizon. Maya sat in the car, her father beside her, and finally felt a sense of calm settle over her. The tension from the police station still lingered, a dull ache in her arms and her heart, but she knew she was safe now. Her father, though usually composed and strict, had been firm and unyielding tonight, ensuring that the truth came out and that she would be protected. His presence was a shield, and for the first time since the incident began, Maya felt the weight of fear start to lift. The city lights blurred past as the car drove through the streets. Outside, the world seemed normal. The same people walking along the sidewalks, the same cars passing by. But for Maya, nothing would ever feel completely ordinary again. The events of the evening had left a mark, and she knew that her life, her understanding of justice, and her perspective on the world had all shifted. Yet even in the face of fear and uncertainty, she felt a strange sense of empowerment. She had survived something that had seemed impossible, and she had found strength she didn't know she had. Her father broke the silence, his voice calm but filled with resolve. Maya, what happened tonight will not be ignored. I've already made sure that the officers responsible are suspended, and a full investigation has begun. This is not just about protecting you, it's about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. Maya nodded, tears welling up again, but these were not tears of fear. They were tears of relief and gratitude. I can't believe how quickly everything changed once you arrived, she whispered. It felt like the whole world was against me, and then suddenly it wasn't. Her father smiled gently. The world can feel unfair sometimes. People in positions of power sometimes abuse it, but tonight, we made sure that power met accountability. That is how change begins. As they drove home, Maya's father spoke about the steps that would follow. He explained that the FBI would review all evidence, interview witnesses, and ensure that the officers involved were held accountable for their actions. Maya listened carefully, understanding that while the immediate danger was over, the process of justice would continue for weeks, even months. It was a long road, but she trusted her father completely to guide it. Back at her apartment, Maya felt the comfort of familiarity, the soft lighting, the smell of fresh coffee from earlier in the day, the warmth of home. She sank into a chair and let out a long, shuddering breath. Her father placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You're safe, Maya. No one can hurt you now. And because of what happened tonight, many others will be safer too. Maya looked up at him, her eyes bright despite exhaustion. I never thought I'd be in a situation like this. It was so frightening, I felt powerless. But having you there changed everything. Her father nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. You weren't powerless. You were brave. You answered honestly, stayed calm, and reached out for help when you needed it. Courage isn't always about fighting. It's about doing what's right, even when you're scared. And tonight, you showed tremendous courage. In the days that followed, the story of Maya's experience spread across the nation. Videos of the incident, captured by bystanders, circulated widely on social media. People expressed outrage at the officers' actions and admiration for Maya's bravery. News outlets covered the story, highlighting not just the injustice she had faced, but also the way her father's position helped bring accountability quickly. Public discussion focused on police accountability, racial profiling, and the importance of oversight in law enforcement. The officers involved faced immediate consequences. They were placed on administrative leave, and internal investigations were launched to examine their conduct. The news coverage and public attention ensured that the process would be thorough and transparent. Maya knew that while punishment alone wouldn't erase what had happened, it was a step toward ensuring that similar incidents would be prevented in the future. Maya herself began to feel a shift within. The fear that had consumed her slowly transformed into a determination to use her voice. She spoke with reporters, giving interviews that emphasized the importance of standing up for oneself and seeking justice, even when the odds seemed against you. Her story became an example of resilience, courage, and the power of speaking up. People across the country were inspired by her calm, measured approach, and many praised her for handling the situation with dignity, despite the fear and pain she had endured. At home, her father continued to support her, not just as a parent, but as a mentor. He encouraged her to focus on her studies but also to think about the broader impact her experience could have. Together, they discussed ways to advocate for young people who might find themselves in similar situations, emphasizing the importance of legal knowledge, self-protection, and the courage to reach out for help when needed. Maya's life slowly returned to normal, but it was different now. She felt stronger, more aware, and more determined to make a difference. She joined student advocacy groups, attended community meetings, and became involved in initiatives aimed at promoting justice and accountability. Her experience had given her a unique perspective, and she realized that her voice could be a powerful tool for change. Despite the trauma of that night, Maya's relationship with her father grew even closer. She no longer saw him just as a parent who guided her in life's small decisions. She saw him as a figure of protection, justice, and moral courage. And though the events of that night would remain in her memory forever, they also became a source of strength, reminding her that even in the darkest moments, there was hope, there was protection, and there was a path toward justice. One evening, a few weeks after the incident, Maya and her father sat together on the balcony of their apartment. The city lights shimmered below, and the air was calm. She turned to him, a small smile on her face. "Dad, thank you for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you." He smiled back, his eyes warm. "You don't need to thank me, Maya. You were brave tonight. And together, we made sure that the world saw the truth. Remember that strength. It's yours to keep." Maya nodded, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in days. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but now she understood the power of resilience, the importance of courage, and the difference that one person, one voice, could make when paired with truth and determination. Her story, once marked by fear and injustice, had transformed into a story of hope, accountability, and change. Maya realized that while the night had been terrifying, it had also given her a new sense of purpose. She was no longer just a young student walking home. She was someone who had faced fear, stood her ground, and emerged stronger than ever. And, in that moment, looking at her father and feeling the quiet strength of the city around her, Maya understood something profound. Courage, justice, and love could change the world. One person, one action, one story at a time. Maya was a 20-year-old college student who lived in a small but busy city. She was studying political science, dreaming that one day she could make a difference in the world. It was late in the evening, and she had just finished one of her longest classes of the week. Her backpack was heavy with books, and her steps were slow as she walked down the quiet street that led to her apartment. The cool breeze brushed her face, and the street lights gave the road a soft glow. All she could think about was reaching home, making a warm cup of tea, and calling her father to tell him about her day. Maya's father was the most important person in her life. He was strict, loving, and protective. Despite his busy schedule, he always made time to talk to her every evening. Their conversations were her comfort. She would tell him about her classes, her professors, and even the smallest details of her life. That night she had planned to share something exciting. Her professor had praised her essay, saying she had a natural talent for leadership. She, was eager to hear her father's response because his encouragement always motivated her. As Maya walked, she noticed a police car slowly driving behind her. At first, she thought nothing of it. It was common to see police around and she assumed they were patrolling the area. But the car kept following, matching her pace. Her heartbeat quickened, and she pulled her backpack tighter to her shoulder. She glanced at the car and saw 2 officers inside staring at her. For a moment, she tried to convince herself that she was overthinking. After all, she had done nothing wrong. She was just a student walking home after class. Suddenly, the car's siren gave a short burst and the officers pulled over. One of them stepped out and called to her. "Hey, you there, stop for a second." Maya paused, confused. She looked around as if expecting to see someone else behind her, but the street was empty. It was clear they were speaking to her. She stopped walking, though her legs trembled slightly. "Yes, officer?" she asked politely, trying to keep her voice calm. The officer looked her up and down. "What are you doing out here this late?" "I'm just coming back from my college class. I live 2 blocks away," she explained, clutching the straps of her backpack. The other officer had stepped out too, and now both of them stood near her. Their expressions were sharp, not friendly. One of them said, "We got reports about suspicious activity in this area. You match the description." Maya's eyes widened. "Suspicious activity? I was just walking home. I don't know what you mean." The officers exchanged a glance as though her words were not enough. Maya's heart sank. She had heard stories from her friends and from the news about people being questioned unfairly, but she never thought it would happen to her. She had always believed that if you respected the law and stayed honest, you had nothing to fear. But now, standing under the harsh glare of the streetlight with 2 police officers towering over her, she realized how quickly things could change. "I need to see some identification," one officer demanded. Maya nodded quickly, eager to prove that she had nothing to hide. She slipped her hand into her bag and carefully pulled out her student ID card. She handed it over, her fingers trembling slightly. The officer snatched it and looked at it closely, then back at her. "College student, huh?" he said, almost with disbelief. "Yes, sir," Maya replied softly. "I was just heading home." The officer handed the ID back, but his tone did not soften. "And why were you walking so fast when you saw our car?" "I wasn't walking fast," Maya said, nervously. "I was just trying to get home. It's late and my father expects my call." The second officer stepped closer, narrowing his eyes. "You sound nervous. People usually sound nervous when they're hiding something." Maya shook her head quickly. "No, I'm just nervous because you stopped me. I've never been in this situation before." Her words were honest, but they didn't seem to matter. The officers circled her like she was a suspect, asking questions that didn't make sense. Why was she out so late? Did she know anyone in the neighborhood? Had she been with anyone earlier? Each question made her more anxious, but she answered, politely, hoping the encounter would end soon. Inside, however, her thoughts were racing. She wondered why they couldn't just accept her explanation. She had her ID, she had been honest, and she was clearly just a student walking home. Still, they seemed determined to treat her as though she was guilty of something. She thought of her father in that moment and wished she could call him. If only he were there, everything would be different. He always knew how to handle situations like this. Minutes passed, though it felt much longer to Maya. The officers kept questioning her and the tension in the air grew heavier. She could see a few people across the street watching quietly, unsure if they should intervene. Her palms grew sweaty as she clutched her bag tightly. Finally, one of the officers said sharply, "We're going to need you to come with us for further questioning." Maya froze. "But why? I haven't done anything wrong." Her voice cracked, slightly, fear slipping through despite her attempt to stay calm. "You're resisting," the officer said, his tone accusing. "No, I'm not resisting," Maya protested quickly. "I'm just saying, I really haven't done anything. Please, I live right there, I can show you." Her pleas fell on deaf ears. The officers stepped closer, their presence overwhelming. Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the situation was getting worse. She had done everything right, answered politely, shown her ID, explained herself, but it wasn't enough. In that moment, she understood that sometimes, no matter how hard you tried, people saw only what they wanted to see. The night that had begun so normally, with classes, books, and thoughts of tea and her father's voice, had turned into something she never imagined. She felt a cold wave of fear wash over her as the reality sank in. Her life, so ordinary just an hour ago, was now tangled in a situation she didn't deserve, and she had no idea how it would end.